Hello, everyone. My name is Ricardo, and this is Taste Porto Bites and Insights Podcast. And today, with me, a very special guest, Amy.
Hello.
How do you feel?
I feel great. Great to be here.
Good to be back to Porto.
Good to be back. Good to be finally here full time. It's been a long time coming, so yeah, really excited.
To put into context, my conversation with Guy, your husband, went very well. He kept talking about you, just so you know. I think
I've heard
it's
that.
yes, because you were sitting right here, so you know that. Um, what was the list of cities Porto was competing with when you had to choose a place to retire?
To be fair, it was a pretty short list. So between each of Guy and I have been to about 45 countries each. Each of us have lived in 6 different countries, not that don't overlap each other. And when we thought of where we were living in Sydney at the time, where we thought, where are we going to retire? In Sydney, I would have retired in Sydney in a heartbeat, except it is so far away from the rest of the world. So realistically speaking, we were down to Italy and Portugal.
Hmm.
It didn't take very long to research Italy to go, Portugal is really the place to go. And we knew that Lisbon really didn't have the vibe that we were sort of feeling, and then Porto Porto hit everything. Every single check on our box, it was Porto.
How familiar were you with the city's history and background before the move?
We'd been here. He had spent a fair bit of time here. We had been here about 10 years earlier. Um, I wouldn't say that I was an expert on the historical aspects of it. I knew the city and just the way it felt when you came here, and obviously the iconic shot from Gaia when you see it is something that when you see it you think, I thought they were photoshopping this picture. Like I cannot believe that this is what it looks like every day. So, uh, but there was definitely a learning curve in the things that we learned about the city.
Hmm. And how did your family and friends reacted to your decision to move over here?
I I have lived in so many different places that I think none of them were expecting that I was gonna be moving back to Canada. My my parents, I think, obviously would like me to be closer. I haven't been within 10 hours of my parents, I think, since I was 18, so I don't think, so shockingly enough, it's not that far to get back to Toronto from here. There's daily flights, 2 or 3 daily flights a day. I can be there, like, in the next day. So it's not like it's that bad. The world is a much smaller place than it used to be.
Hmm.
Um, I can FaceTime with my parents now, which is something that, when I was in my 20s and I moved to Sweden, my mother would just call me in the middle of the night because you had a phone and that's all you
Time
had.
zones, yeah.
Then you had a time zone difference. So I think they've been really supportive, and we've had family come over here already. My parents come over every single year, and they've really enjoyed that. Although they were over at Christmas, Thanksgiving, Christmas, New Year's this year, and said they're not coming back in the winter again. They'll be coming back in the nicer weather.
Do you think you are uh, that you'll be able or capable to turn someone to come to Portugal?
Um, I have certainly been giving it a pretty good effort. I think if anybody asks me, um, I'm a pretty good advocate for
Hmm.
why Portugal is a place that should be on people's radar when they retire. I think there's still a fair bit of people are nervous to leave their own country and what they're comfortable with and what they're familiar with. And I think um, because we have moved around so much, I know how easy it can be and how rewarding it is when you get the right place.
Yeah. And in terms of researching, and obviously you did a lot of research for the move over. Um, is there any part of the history of the country that you were most fascinated with?
I mean, again, Portugal's been one of those countries that's always sort of punched above its weight, right? It's a little tiny country that managed at one point to control the seas of the entire world, and the size of its naval history is just tremendous. So I think that was really great. We are from Montreal and Toronto, which have two very large Portuguese populations. Oddly enough, a lot of them seem to come from the Azores, and I feel
Hmm.
like there's more people from the Azores in Toronto than there are in the Azores, which which is
It's
interesting. So
actually possible.
so you get this really interesting sort of the background and the history and the culture, and that translates nicely. Um, but again, even now, like the football team is so much better than it should be for the size of the country.
Yeah.
And I sat disappointed with the rest of the country. Ah,
It was an awful moment, but not our first. I still have, how do you call it, cold sweats when I think about the Euro 2004 we lost to Greece, and I almost have a drop,
little
yes,
tear. Yeah.
coming out. We always seem to be very eager to show off our capabilities as a former great empire now that we are such a small country. But I think one of the most curious facts about the Portuguese is that we're always very bad describing ourselves. How would you describe a Portuguese person to someone new to the country or thinking about visiting? How would you describe such a person?
I would describe the Portuguese as intensely passionate. There is there eh, there's a lot of talk about how nice Portuguese are, how friendly, they're always smiling and easy to help out. But there is like the steel rod of a spine in the Portuguese people that are resilient and have dealt with some difficult times and have really come through them quite strong, and have just been just a really intensely passionate, proud people who are rightfully proud of what the country's has done through its entire history. The oldest continuous borders of a country in Europe, I understand. So
You seem to have a lot of knowledge about Portuguese history. Is that a subject that interests you?
I I'm a spreadsheet person, so I like to know a lot of things about everything and keep track. I am also fortunate to have a good memory, so when I learn these little tidbits of useless information,
They
they get
keep.
they get socked away in my mind a little bit. So, um, yeah, so I am fascinated by history in general.
How was it when you realized that Portugal was again a tidbit of information, the longest dictatorship in Europe? Did that kind of surprise you? And in comparison to the population that you see, how can it be that they had such a long time where they were hid from the world?
And it's one of those fascinating things when you think in my lifetime, Portugal was a dictatorship. And I mean, not for very long. I'm not gonna lie, I'm not that old, but it just feels like um it is so far removed from where we are. And it's an interesting dictatorship because we've been to other countries, Cambodia, and I'm fascinated at what happens to that makes a country become a dictatorship
Hmm.
and makes people follow a certain path. And Portugal's is quite a bit different than a lot of the other stories. The dictatorship, it's not a benevolent dictatorship, but it feels like the reasons that he was doing that is something that he actually believed in. It didn't seem to be the stealing all of the money and
Yeah,
becoming rich and living in a glass palace, in like
it
some
was
other countries.
almost a nobling act, the one that moved him, right?
In his mind.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, obviously this was not great for a lot of the country. But it's fascinating how it came about and then ultimately how it ended, right? And again, it felt like it ended in a way that people just, okay, we're done. This
Gonna
is
move on to the
We're going to
next
move on to the
thing.
next thing. We're going to do it peacefully. We're going to stick the carnations in the rifles, and we will move on.
Do you think that in your trajectory you've been to such populous cities and so populated cities and so fast, where people obviously have a lot to say, but nowadays with political matters and political correctness, even, it's hard sometimes to start a conversation and speak your mind. Do you think that moving to Portugal also, it's because Portugal is in a way an enabler of this, trying to talk through things and getting deep into different subjects that sometimes would be perceived as problematic?
Absolutely. I mean, in New York, if you try to carry on a conversation with a stranger, at best, you are met with, you know,
What?
at worst, you are met with much worse. So, it's not a even though it's a huge city, it's not a place that it's hard to feel like you're part of something. You've got to really seek out that connection. Here, when you sit down, it's very easy just to sit to the person next to you and just start talking
Mhm.
about anything. Um, and I think there is we can disagree and still have a discussion. And I think that is a lost art that isn't happening everywhere in the world. Um, we all want the same basic things. We may disagree about how we go about getting those, uh, but people can have that conversation here.
When was it the last time that some random occasion where you started talking with a random stranger occurred that you recall of such a situation?
Well, so we
And
were
was it football that you started talking
it
about?
wasn't football. I mean, I did have a conversation about football. I watch enough that I can have that conversation to say, Diogo Costa, right? Look at him. Isn't he amazing?
Those hands.
Look at those hands. I mean, first time anybody's ever saved all three shots in the penalty shootout. It's amazing. Um, we were actually just talking at the food festival, yesterday, and one of the vendors there represented a winery that we had been to on our very first trip here. And it was one of those incredibly special moments that we had where we were just driving. We saw a winery and we drove in. Because again, at the time, not all wineries had wine
Hmm.
shops. This one did not, but the guy who worked there, the vineyard manager, happened to speak English, and he's like, "Let's take you for a tour." Took us for a tour, sat us down at their picnic table outside overlooking the Douro, must have opened 5 bottles of wine, wanted us to try absolutely everything. Then he called up a local restaurant, Doc, out near Pinau.
Hmm.
I said, I have some VIPs. Can you get them a table for dinner tonight? Everything. And it was one of those such a special moment that when I saw this guy yesterday, I said, I wanted to come over and try this wine because this is one of my favorite memories of Portugal. And so we just had a conversation about what's happened at the winery, and it's recently been bought. Uh,
And you catched up,
and
like
we're
conversation.
sort of catching up with this guy I don't know from, and even though we're at a festival, we have the time to sit there and talk.
Yeah.
It doesn't feel like he's just like, okay, I have to give you my 1.5 ounce pour and get you on so I can get the next person in here.
Do you think people here have a tendency to like start a conversation and then get very involved with it just for the sake of getting involved with it? There's like no second intention with what they're doing.
Yeah, I think so. And I think there's time. There's time to do that. And time is, I think that the human connection is important. And so um we when you go to restaurants, you can definitely see that. And sometimes it's frustrating to be in a grocery store and the people in front of you are having a long conversation about something and you're thinking, I just want to buy my tomatoes.
I feel that as
Yeah.
well. Yeah.
But there is such, there's that lost art of connection
Mhm.
that's happening there that I'm
But
happy to
there's
be part of.
in certain situations there's this kind of like anachronism where you go to like this mega superstore in a shopping mall, and all of a sudden you have this lady that's talking to the cashier as if she was in the neighborhood. And
Yep.
it seems as though the city is evolving, and it's evolving quite rapidly, and at the same time there's this huge past that simply doesn't get wiped out
And
because
it
it
shouldn't.
shouldn't, right? Uh, Porto is now at the center of all conversations in the world about where people want to go, and it seems as though if people haven't come here yet, they're thinking about coming. Is
Everybody I know.
is that
eh,
something that you feel presently, even in your day-to-day routines in the city as we speak?
yeah, everybody I know has been here or is on their way to come here or um and I don't remember the last time I know any city that has sort of had this much buzz
Hmm.
as Porto. Um and you can see it obviously in the number of people that are here at the waterfront in the summer, which is crazy. You you can see it in the number of new hotels that are opening, and the number of Airbnbs that hopefully we'll have less of. Um, and it's obviously resulting in some issues with housing and uh, but the city is still retaining who it is, I think. Um, and I think one of the, just referring back to one of the things that Guy had said before, 20 years ago, Porto looked a little bit gray, and gentrification is difficult, but the city needed some help. It couldn't have continued on the trajectory that it was
Hmm.
on. It needed something to to bring it back a little bit. It was a little more uh there was a little more crime.
A
It
lot
was it,
more.
it was
Yeah.
it was a little rougher. And now it feels like one of the safest places.
If you would have to give me like at least two or three different pros and cons about moving into Porto, what would they be?
Um
And we can start with the cons so that we.
I mean, the cons are harder. So we can start with the pros. I mean, the
Okay.
pros are obviously it's one of the most beautiful cities in the world, and the ability to walk around and just explore and be entertained by the city just being is something that you don't get everywhere. So uh, the food is tremendous. It's healthier, it's tastier, there's more variety of it.
Hmm.
And then the sense of peace, right? Like Porto is is a peaceful place. I take personally a lot of calmness from seeing water. We're on the Douro River. The ocean is right there, and the ability just to sit there and have a coffee and watch boats go up and down the river. This is a good lifestyle. I mean, from a con perspective, the bureaucracy, which is I think number one on everybody's list, Porto's been good for that. I found that people are trying to help and they're trying to be helpful. It's that everything has to be done by hand in paper and in person, which seems like a little bit of an inefficient way of doing
Hmm.
everything. But I got the time, so that's worked. I can't think of any other. I can't really think of any other negatives. It I couldn't imagine it being better than
But
I have.
are you seriously? Because when one listens to all the seagulls yelling at nights, like at 3 in the morning, 4 in the morning, that should be a big negative side to the city because seagulls seem not to shut up, right?
This I don't mind the sound of birds. Like to be in a city and hear birds all the time. I mean, Saturday morning we do the motorcycles drive by the front of our house and they apparently have to take the muffler off, so it's very loud. And they appear a bunch of dirt bikes going by the front of the house. But okay, so that's 4 hours a week. That is a little bit unpleasant. The seagulls are just a great sound. I have loved it. And I'm what they call at this point, I guess they call it peak pastel de nata, right? Where like my rose-colored glasses are so rosy
Okay.
and I there's really nothing to complain about. I mean, at the end of the day, I chose this. I chose to come here of all the places in the world, and I can't complain if things aren't exactly the way I expect them to be or I want them to be because I'm doing this to myself. This is something, but I'm not it has been the easiest place we've had to integrate in and sort of adopt the culture. It's just culturally, it fits with who we are.
I know also that you brought your pets with you for this journey.
2 dogs and a cat.
How are they adjusting?
I mean, the cat's great. The cat is pretty easygoing. One of the dogs is just happy to be invited, and the other one is not sure why we would have done this to her. But she'll she'll get there. She'll get there. As long as she can sleep on the couch,
Mhm.
she'll find her way through.
Was this a complicated process of moving over with pets and all?
No, I didn't think it was that bad. We used a pet chartering service. It was pretty straightforward. We came in through Paris and then we came down from there. Paris was just easier for us. The paperwork was relatively straightforward. Our vet is a USDA certified vet, so he knew everything to do. We got our paperwork well in advance. Um, we just keeping in mind we had moved dogs to Australia 4 years ago, so the difference is, I mean, if you can move an animal to Australia, moving an animal to Europe is not that hard.
It's the easiest in the world, right?
It's substantially easier than
And
Australia.
how is it to take your dogs, for instance, for a walk and having everybody want to pet them? Is that something that might cause some strange feelings
So
moving over here?
yeah, my dogs are older, so we're not going for super long walks. We've got Orient Park right near our
Hmm.
house, which is great, and it's an underutilized park that you don't see a lot of people in. Um, it's me and all the other retirees out there walking in the morning, getting our steps in. So they don't see a lot of people. So there's not a lot of people that are trying to pet them, which I think is good for them. They're not brave
Hmm.
dogs. Um, so we can't take them into the city because we have to go up that hill, and they
Yeah.
wouldn't make it up the hill.
And just for me to understand, because you came here with not much expectations about what you're gonna get, right? So everything was kind of taken in as a positive,
Mm.
right? So in throughout your research, you basically analyzed the location in town where you wanted to stay, and you had some at least objectives about what you wouldn't want to miss out on. Is that why you chose to be a little bit further out of the heavy, busy center part of town?
Yeah, yeah, and part of it is there's a romantic notion that you wanna live in the heart of it all, which is great until summer hits and there's a festival every single day, and the tourists and the people who are there on vacation are on the streets at 2 or 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning having a good time, and that's great. So we knew we wanted to be close enough to enjoy it, but not so close as that we were gonna hear it, because there's a difference between visiting a place and staying there for a few weeks and living, right? So we wanted a place. We didn't have a lot of criteria. I wanted to see the water. Guy wanted to be able to get on his bike and go right from the front door. We wanted to be able to walk to a cafe and a restaurant. Didn't need a bunch of cafes, didn't need stores, didn't need that was it. And when we came to see this place, it was just check, check, check. And it was absolutely perfect. And as though the city was showing us this is where we wanted to be. I was walking around the area. Gondomar was doing some outdoor festival. I thought,
This is the
this
place.
is the place. These are my people. They've never done a festival there again. So it's
It was just to convince
it
you
was
to go
just to
there.
convince me that this is where we wanted to be, but it worked. And even now, with the benefit of 5 years of history, I still wouldn't have picked a different place.
I know also that you like to cook, right? Is
I
something
I
that
do cook.
uh,
I do cook.
and
Um, I don't know how to cook anything Portuguese, so that'll be on my list of things to do.
because you have a lot of free time now, or do you?
I mean, you think you'd have a lot of free time, but it feels like there is more to do in this city, and there's so you when you first come, obviously there's all the paperwork, which takes up a lot of time because it's again the rule of three. It takes 3 times to do anything. Um, there are it's things you need to set up, things that even though we've had the house for a while, oh, I need to go and buy that because we walk everywhere. It takes, it takes us an hour to walk to the grocery store to get the big things. And then I saunter into the little tiny markets and pick up, tomato here and
You're like
carrots
a
here.
collector.
I'm like a little collector, right? And sometimes I have to backtrack because I thought something would be better at this store, but they didn't have any more. So I had to go back and get tomatoes at a previous store. So I sort of have been enjoying that. Um, so it feels as though some days I'd like to just not do anything. I'd like to relax, but it's been really busy. And so hopefully when the winter comes and it's a little less nice, I'll do more cooking.
But just to get a little bit back to something we probably should have started with a conversation. You come from a professional past that's very, very stressful, I would say.
Yes, I was a banker on Wall Street.
Yeah. So in that sense, you had a lot in your mind all the time.
Yes.
That adjustment of moving, it's not just the adjustment. You also have to adjust to the fact that all of a sudden all these worries, all these concerns, they have to be kind of passed into a different shelf and possibly not that much revisited, right?
Yeah, and that I think my husband would likely say that I have transferred all of the energy that I put into my job into our lives. And he's been retired for longer than I have, so I think he was a little more used to
The pace.
the pace of a retirement lifestyle, and I've already signed up for Portuguese lessons. We're doing our wine set level 2 classes. We're doing a Portuguese wine class. We're doing like so we are hitting the ground running here. And I have spreadsheeted our lives in a number of different ways of budgeting and time and Google calendaring. So it was surprisingly easy to walk away from the job though.
Hmm.
I had a great job, loved it, worked for a really great company. Um, but there's a day where you wake up and you think, I can't, I can't do this anymore.
Hmm.
This isn't who I am. So making the adjustment to move here was so easy. It's what like, it's what I needed to do.
Professionally, though, it's always something, and it's like uh, playing in the back of your mind, right? So you're here and adjusting to the reality. You keep track of the news in Portugal, or you try to keep track.
We're keeping track of the news in Portugal. As part of learning Portuguese, we are listening to the Portuguese news every morning, um, which has been really good. There are a couple of English newspapers that we read as well. Um, it's a totally different way to absorb information than it is if you're in New York. It's
Hmm.
just, um, it's been great.
And have you already managed to get a sense of what's going on currently in Portugal, or is that something that's a little bit far removed still?
I mean, we're getting a sense. I think we'll have to be here a little bit longer to understand why things are happening and what like I mean we did watch the election
Hmm.
and the results of that and why and again I'm quite keen as to what makes people do what they do. So the rise of Shega and the Algarve and why that party was so successful there, but not successful in the rest of the country, I think has been sort of a fascinating um, just a fascinating turn.
Hmm.
And then realizing that Portugal's a pretty small geographic country, but the different areas are so unique in the way that they approach things. Like people from Porto don't approach things the way the people from Lisbon, the people from Faro, the people from Madeira. Um, and and so that's what we need to really understand, and that'll just take some time to understand the
Adjusting,
motivations as to
right?
why.
Yeah. And in your travels through Portugal, and you did some already in the since the first time you came over, is there any other particular place that it basically arises your interest in visiting, and maybe even, well, maybe we want something even calmer in a few years and we'll move even further inland, or a different place in Portugal.
And there are so many places in Portugal that are uh, that you go to and think, oh, I could live here. Braga and Guimarães. I
I think
think
it's the best time I've heard someone not from Portugal pronouncing Guimarães.
Well, I thank
Congratulations.
you. That is why my Portuguese lessons have gone so slow because I spend so much time going, and how do we say this word specifically? But those are two cities that I think we could have lived in. I know that, I mean, we love Aveiro, but I don't think that's a place I could live, but I'd love to visit. Um, we haven't done as much in central Portugal as maybe I would like to. So we have Coimbra that we've been to. But yeah, there's a lot of places here. We were in Funchal a couple of months ago.
Hmm.
Loved that as well. Wouldn't live there, but think
It's beautiful. It's
it's
gorgeous.
beautiful.
And the climbs also,
And the
they're a
climbs,
little bit too much,
they
I would
make
say.
Porto seem like it's flat.
It is flat.
Yeah.
It is totally flat.
So
But in going back also, and because it's for me kind of relevant to talk about food, because that is in a certain sense a big, I would say, a big place for Portuguese people. What would you say is your favorite of all dishes or ingredients?
I
And
like those little clams.
oh, bouillon pato clams, you
Yeah,
say?
the little clams with the wine and garlic sauce. I think maybe the greatest thing
Ever.
ever.
Are you a fan of bread? I
I
ask.
am a huge fan of bread,
So maybe
and you
that's the
take that
reason.
bread and you dip it in that vinegar, that wine and garlic sauce.
And tell me one thing. Now that you're here and you have kind of a routine, how do you spend the Sunday?
Sunday, um, so we get up really early, um, usually before 6, and then take the dogs for a walk. And then I sit on my deck, have coffee and and a freshly squeezed orange juice because the grocery store I can get my liter of freshly squeezed orange juice on Saturdays. And we watch the boats go by for a while, and then we walk up we walk up the hill and we find a different neighborhood within the city to sort of explore, have a coffee and a pastry, and by the time you know it,
It's nighttime.
it's nighttime. Yeah, and that's what we enjoy doing. That is a perfect Sunday.
And what are in your opinion like the or in your perspective right now, if you had to think of it, like future objectives that you'll have to accomplish, that you'll have to conquer?
I mean, the first one on the list is learn and speak the language in at a level that I think is proficient. I mean, you need the A2 for the citizenship test, but I don't think that is
Enough?
something that's not enough to really enjoy. I think we didn't come here to make people accommodate us by speaking English. And again, like perfect. We were at the festival yesterday, and I'm trying to speak, and my accent is probably better than my actual vocabulary, which causes a problem because then people just and in Portuguese, I apologized to this woman that I didn't speak Portuguese very well, and she said to me ever so kindly, "Would you like me to keep speaking to you in Portuguese, or would you like us to switch to English now?" Which I thought was just the nicest thing. And I said, "No, I would like to keep speaking in Portuguese if we have time." And she's like, "Sure." um, so I think that's the first objective. I'd like to, I think we're here and we need to give back to the community that's going to be welcoming us in. So, well, once I can speak Portuguese a little bit better, I'm hoping to find some charitable events to help out with. Particularly, I've been working in finance for an awfully long time, and I'd love to help some young entrepreneurs figure out how to.
You think that language is really that bridge that will take you over to the next step, which is like a almost total integration to the community here?
I think language is important to be totally integrated. Do I think I can help people before I speak the language? Yes, yes. But I'd like to be able to. I, again, I think there's a certain amount of understanding of a culture
Hmm.
that comes from understanding the language and why. and why you say things the way you do.
Mhm. You read a lot about Portuguese. You read Portuguese literature. Or you are developing that interest about Portuguese writers.
I have not, because my vocabulary is too small
Hmm.
at this point, but certainly that's what I will be doing. Yeah.
And in terms of history books or English written history books, have you already dove into them and tried to collect as much information in order for you to be part of the talks with the jokes? Because that's, I feel as though what you want about learning Portuguese is to all of a sudden sit down at the coffee house near the water and then chat with the bunch, right? And
Chat
start
with the
talking
bunch.
and getting integrated that way on a whole different level so that celebrations are also a part of your daily routine and you can be fully, right? Is that it?
I think that's it. I think that's it. I think it's one thing to go to the Saint Joao festival. It's another thing to understand why somebody's hitting you in the head with a hammer or a garlic bulb
In the face.
in the
Yeah.
face. Um,
How many Saint João have you been
you
here
know
already?
what? This is the first one. The one that we just had was the first one we'd ever actually made it to, just
Okay.
because of timing.
It was
And
a wonderful night. It
it was
was.
fantastic. Um, I don't love large crowds of people. I find it a little overwhelming. And I thought when we first got there, I thought, oh, there's so many people here. I don't know how if this is going to be something I can do. It felt so calming, and so people were very respectful of everybody's personal space, except for the people hitting you in the head with a hammer. Um, but it was really such a community event. You see grandparents being helped along by their grandchildren as they're walking down, and the music was playing, and it didn't hurt that they were playing a lot of 80s music, which I obviously is the greatest music of all time. So everybody was singing along, and it was just really
Did
pleasant.
it give you a different perspective about the city the first time you were here for Saint João?
I think it really solidified what we thought is that this is a village, right? The, there's a bunch of different areas of this city, and each one of them is its own community and its own village. And again, all of everybody seems to know each other, and even if they don't know each other, they feel like they're part of something. And I think that's what makes a good society work, is when people think they're part of something.
Are you on the way to being part of Porto?
I am hopeful. I am trying very hard, and it's something that I'd love. I want to be part of the community.
In my opinion, and if I have a vote, I think both you and you are already part of the community. So
It is amazing that, because people said, "Oh, it must be hard to move." You know what? We've already got our guys, right? Like we got the guy that is the handyman, and we've got the guy that takes care of the air conditioning system, and we have people that I know that if we needed to call them for anything, we know who to call, which is the hardest part about moving, is not knowing what to do in a situation, not knowing who to call or how to get. And I think, life gives you what you give it. And I think we've tried very hard to nurture the relationships that we have with people in this community. We've tried very hard to support the community that we're living in. And as a result, I think we've made some really good friends from people that we've worked with here.
you already know about the word saudade,
Ah, so
right?
dad.
Is there anything you feel saudade from abroad, from outside before coming here?
That I felt so dad about?
Or that you felt from. So if you're here in Porto, do you feel saudade from anything in New York that you don't have
No.
here? Or from
Sorry, was
Montreal?
that too quick?
No, no,
No,
no. We
I
can edit that. Don't worry.
no, I Guy has a phrase, make a decision and move forward.
Hmm.
We made a decision. This is where we were going to live, and we're moving forward. I loved my time in New York. It was fantastic. It's it's no longer, that period of my life came to an end, and I there are aspects of it that you miss, but we're here now, and I've really been enjoying this, and there's nothing that I am pining for.
Very well. It is a pleasure to have you here. We're at the end.
Okay,
It's now the
sorry.
end time. Uh, although I know that because you were watching while I was having you here, you're gonna be extremely surprised with what's gonna happen here. We prepare this in advance, so I think that it's merely a symbol. It's basically a token of our we're grateful that you're here. We're thankful more than grateful that you're here. And I hope you do come back. The
Thank you.
swallows are a great symbol for a lot of things. They also symbolize spring and the coming of summer, and with summer opportunity, growth and rebirth. So I can only hope that this coming over here is but a rebirth for both of you.
I'm
So
sure it will be.
thank you so much
Thank you.
for being here. And as for you watching, we'll be seeing each other again.